So in this video we will talk about Kafka as event-driven architecture. But before we move to Kafka, I'll talk about myself. My name is Rishi Prakash. You're watching this video probably on Study with Rishi YouTube channel. I'm also a mentor at Scalar Academy, and I have given my social media handles in the description of the video. Do join me, I would love that. Now let's move to Kafka and its requirements and the beginning of technology and why such requirement is there, that Kafka kind of structure is being put into multiple architectures across the industry by a lot of organizations within our current tech market. Now what the picture you are seeing here is, it is depicting the starting of the computer technology in 1950s till 2000. Now we will talk about each of the specific part one by one. In 1950s, there were two professors within University of Pennsylvania who created this ENIAC computer on the behest, that means on the order of US military. So it was a specific uses computer. A specific uses computer means that it was created for some purpose, and it was not a generic computer as we usually see. Probably the laptop or mobile you're watching this video in is actually a generic computer. At that point of time in 1950s, when we created the first computer, it was a specific uses computer. The issue with it was that it was not easily programmable. Programming it was a nightmare because it was a specific purpose computer. Now this was the start of computer technology. We have created a lot of progress since then. After 1950s, in 1970s, second biggest revolution happened, and it was when RDBMS, or the Central Repository Idea, born. That now you can store some data in a computer. Now how big this particular invention was, we will see in coming slides. But because of this 1970s, there was this term coined mainframe. You might have heard about this mainframe in multiple movies or multiple old organizations, and mainly in usual finance based organizations which are pretty old. For example, HSBC, I saw that they are still using mainframe. Why? Because this is stable at this point of time, and there is no requirement to move or some other kind of RDBMS. But with the help of this revolutionary idea of central repository, we were able to come up with something called client server architecture, because now one of the server can contain info, while other clients or computers, they can just talk to the computer and retrieve the data. This was really a big thing at that point of time. It was really big thing that now you are using somebody else's computer to get some data and store some data. And because of this, people started creating softwares which can be used by others. This was the beginning of computer business. But still the computer world was not very open. Only after this particular guy, Tim Berners-Lee, he created WWW, World Wide Web, which is basically a protocol over which the internet runs. We started seeing that people have started using internet and web for all kind of things. Like that means it became accessible and useful for common business requirements. So this was the time when web actually became a really necessity of multiple businesses. But at this point of time, there was no idea which was commonly shared by people who were creating these products over like what is the right way to create these products. They started creating everything in one single bundle, and that is where we coined the term monolith. That means now we are creating everything which is in one single bundle. Example of it is that, for example, you are creating a Spring Boot project. Okay, and let's say you are creating Spring Boot project for Instagram. Within Instagram, you see there are multiple sections. One is your logger feed. Second is your profile. Third is your self information, like your own photos or your own videos. When you are creating a monolith architecture for this Instagram, you will put all these three functionalities in one single bundle. What was the upside of having this kind of structure? Like, these are three modules, one module, this is another module. This is modular, but they are in one single bundle. The upside of having this is that it is overall less complex. Like, you know that everything is one single bundle. There is no requirement to manage multiple servers. There is no requirement to maintain a distributed system. The downside of that is that it is not individually scalable. Example, if you are required to scale server capacity for this, you will also be required to increase the capacity for this, because they are in the same bundle. It is the same thing. So they are not individually scalable. Hence scalability became an issue. Okay. Second was that once this bundle becomes really large, it won't be fitting in one single person's head, or one single team won't be able to manage it. And when multiple teams will require to manage such bigger amount of project, such big amount of data, amount of code within a project, there will be a lot of interdependency between teams, which will slow down the product growth. This was the issue. So overall management, it became very difficult. This was the earliest idea of creating a software architecture. Okay. We have moved from there significantly, but this was how people were writing softwares in 2000. Then in 2005 there came a term micro web services. You might have heard about like microservices. Then microservices is also coupled with another term called computing on cloud, or basically like cloud computing. Now this is coupled with another term which is service oriented architecture, where multiple services are there. Okay, so these three terms are being used in a collaboration, in a bundle, in a collection of each other. In 2012 we started having microservices. We started having blogs, or the best practice to create a microservice. What advantage microservice give over monolith architecture? One, they are independently realizable and independently scalable. How? Let's try to understand. Earlier we talked about that within Instagram we have three different modules. One module is logger module. Second module is profile module. The third module is your self-info module. And earlier it was just one single bundle. And then it was deployed on one single server. Now what you could do, you divide this into three different servers. So logger is in this server, server 1. Then there is another server which is hosting profile. And then there is third which is hosting self data. The issue we saw with monolithic was that if you require to scale logger, you will be scaling everything. Okay, so everything being scaled as a whole. In this case, you can scale everything independently. You can create capacity of each of the server independently. But here comes the downside of using a microservice. The downside of using a microservice is that now these logger, profile and self data, they are talking over internet with each other. So there is an internet in between. This internet is in between. Everyone is talking to this internet, and hence they are coupled with network, and network is bounded by speed of it. Its speed can be maximum speed of light. So there is a term called latency. So now latency is introduced first. Second is this network can go down. Hence partition can happen. Partition of network can happen. So this is the downside of having microservices. Microservices is an advantage over monolith. But it's not that it is a magic solution. It's not a magic solution. There are problems with microservices also. But we started brainstorming over how to overcome these problems. Now we specifically talk about one particular type of problem here, which is inter-microservices communication. That means how, let's say you have created 3 microservices, a logger microservice, profile microservice and self microservice, how they are talking to each other. This is important. Now because of this, why this issue was not present in monolithic architecture? Because everything was in one single bundle. So a call from service A to service B, it won't fail because this is within same bundle. Within microservices, this is over network. So communication can fail. A failure can occur. Why it can occur? As we just talked, that there could be latency, there could be partition of network. Partition means the network can go down. Hence we started looking for multiple ways of communication. The first way was having a shared DB. What does having a shared DB mean? That means, let's say there are 2 services, service logger service, which is talking to profile service, and let's say if profile is updated, it will impact the logger service. Then how they are talking to each other? They are basically talking to each other via a shared DB. So there is a DB table in which P is writing its update. From there logger is reading. Logger is writing its update in the DB table from which P is reading. Now this is the way in which it is like tightly coupled with table schema. If table schema changes for any region, other services will also be updated. So this is like we are back to square one. So it was universally rejected as a good idea, because we always try to avoid tight coupling. This is the reason we moved to microservices, because monoliths were highly tightly coupled. But again, if we are having like shared DB, tight coupling is there. So we moved to second type of communication. Second type of communication way is having remote procedural calls. So if you have heard about SOA, which is service oriented architecture, that means there is a service, logger service, which is talking to profile service, and then it is also talking to self service. Now they all know each other via service discovery call. So one is that there is a service discovery call over the network. Once they know which other services are there, they can talk synchronously to each other. That means, what is the meaning of synchronous? That means if L is talking to P, then L is sending a request to P. P is computing the request. It is computing the request, computing, and at this point of time L is doing nothing. It is actually just waiting for response. So we had like latency earlier, now this waiting is also there. So this was some improvement over shared DB, but it was not a very good idea. It worked for a couple of years, but then we moved to a better architecture, which is event-driven architecture. So before we talk about event-driven architecture, let's talk about events. So event is when something is changing, that means a state is changing, a notification will be sent. Okay, if there is a service, logger service, if logger receives something out of like some kind of notification, some event will be sent. Now if this event is directly sent to another service, let's say there is a service called self. Well, let's take a better example actually. Let's take a relevant example. Let's say there is a like self image is uploaded in the self section of Instagram, then it will make some update in the logger feed service of Instagram, which is basically creating your feed. Now this is an event which is being sent from one service to another service. If there is no entity in between and if the event is directly sent from self image to logger feed, it can be synchronous or it can be asynchronous depending on how it is perceived by logger feed. Making it asynchronous means self service won't wait for logger feed service to generate a response. So how is this possible? Well, one of the way is via event. How is this possible? Let's see. So there is self-service. Self-service will send data to one intermediary entity, which is called event logger. Now event logger will send basically from event logger someone who is in a requirement of those event or who is watching those event, watcher services like a logger service, they will read the data. Why this is being done in this way? Because if we are not putting anything in between, service S is directly talking to service L, and let's say service L is also talking to some other service, let's say service P, and in case P goes down, then L won't be able to compute their response. Hence L for S, L is like it is down, so L will also be taken as down, and then S is not able to compute the response in itself, hence it will also be perceived as down, which is basically called cascading failure. To avoid cascading failure, what do? We send data to event logger. Now event logger will log this data even though L is down. Whenever L will come up, then it will read data out of event logger. It will compute the data. It will do the computation. Once the computation is done, it will send a response back to event logger. From there, S will read the data. So in this case, it is acting as a publisher subscriber pattern. This is called event driven architecture. That means an event is being sent from one of the microservices or services to an event sync, event logger. Out of event logger, anybody who is watching for those kind of events, they will read the data and they will compute the response, give back to event logger. Event logger will give back response to the original service, or basically the original service will read the data out of event logger. So just to reiterate over what we have learned, we have a service A. Service A is sending events to event broker. This is event broker. Event broker is logging all the events. Those events and then being consumed by multiple subscribers. Subscribers can be any number of subscribers and producers can be any number of producers. Now this has many implementation. One of the implementation is Kafka. Other implementation can be ActiveMQ or like RabbitMQ. But one of the implementation is Kafka, about which now we are going to talk. So event-driven architecture is possible with Kafka. Now Kafka is present in all the architectures as Kafka clusters. That means it's a bundle, it's a composition of multiple brokers. A broker is basically a server. So it's a composition of multiple servers, Kafka cluster. Now within each Kafka cluster, so each Kafka cluster is identified with an integer ID. Also within each broker it contains topics as partitions. That means, let's say there is a cluster, this is a broker which is a server. Within a server there is data present as topics, like these are topics. One topic, this is another topic, this is third topic. But topics are in themselves divided into multiple partitions. So one Kafka cluster means servers. Out of one server there are, like within a server, this is a server, then there are multiple topics. These are topics, but these topics are in themselves divided into multiple partitions. Okay, this is how it is done within Kafka. So topics are the entity to which and from which data is read and write. Kafka is distributed because, as we talked, that servers are divided into topic, but topics are divided into these multiple partitions, and these partitions, like partitions, are present over multiple brokers. How? Let's see with an example. Now let's say there is like there's a cluster. There's a cluster, and within cluster there are like 3 servers of Kafka, and these 3 servers contain 3 topics. And in configuration we have said each topic is divided into max, or basically like 2 partitions. That means each topic will be present as 2 partitions. So for servers we have sev1, sev2, sev3. These are 3 servers. And topics in Kafka, they are given a name. Let's say there is a name of profile input. This is name of topic. Then there is another topic, profile output. This is one topic, this is another topic. Okay. Now how these topics are divided into 2 partitions. How these will be there? Let's say there is one server, there is another server, and then there is third server. Okay, so because of 2 partitions, let's say profile input 1 is one partition. This is present in sev1, sev2 and sev3. Now this is one partition. When one partition of profile input topic, another partition will present in another sev, either sev2 or sev3. Let's say it is present in p input 1. This is second partition. This is partition 2. Now there is another partition, which is another topic, which is profile output. So let's say profile output first partition is present here. Profile output 1 is present here. second partition of profile output can be present in SEV1 or SEV2. Let's say it is present here. This is how the topics are present within a server. If you observe here, these topics are not directly present. They are present in form of partitions. So topics are present in form of partitions. One topic will be divided into number of partitions configured. It is possible that there is only single partition, but here we have taken as two partitions. Now let's see an example that, like, if we say that there is single partition of each topic, then probably it would have looked like SEV1, SEV2 and SEV3. Then P input, single partition here is present, no other partition present in any other SEV. Then there is like P output. Okay, but in case there are like multiple partitions, they will be distributed. In this case, they are like distributed, divided into one part here and another part is here of same topic. They are distributed over brokers or servers. Similarly, profile output topic is divided into or distributed into two parts and then distributed over multiple brokers. This gave the nature of distribution. This is how Kafka is distributed. Because topics which contains data are divided into partitions, the partitions are distributed over multiple brokers inside clusters. I hope this point I was able to make you understand, because this is very crucial part. This is how Kafka cluster works internally. Okay. Now we continue over Kafka clusters. As we saw that topic partitions are distributed across brokers, we took one example. Each of these partitions, like these partitions, they have their own incremental ID. They have their own incremental ID 1. Second, data is stored in order within single partition. Okay. The one question which can come to your mind is why we are doing partition. Why we are doing partition? This is because of parallelism. Now this parallelism thing I will talk about when we will be discussing about consumers. So in couple of minutes. So in this case we talked about the topic partitions are distributed across brokers. We saw it. Each partition will have its own incremental ID which is called offset. Order of messages is maintained within one specific partition. So the guarantee, this is called Kafka guarantee. Once data is written into a partition, it cannot be changed. This is also a Kafka guarantee. Each topic is identified by its name. As we saw here, that topic name is given like profile output or profile input. This is how they are being identified. Now the issue here is that as we saw that although partitions are present on multiple servers, here we saw it, still there is only one single copy of a partition. So the partition, they are single point of failure. If one of the broker, example in this case, if a broker server 1, if this goes down, this and this information stored in these partitions will be lost. And to avoid any single point of failure, the first thing which we are required to do is replication. we replicate replicas of partitions. So we say, okay, what is the replication factor? This is called replication factor. And say if we make replication factor as 2, that means 2 copies of each partition will be present. In that case, what will happen here is that so far we have seen that there is one single P input 1 and P single input 2. Another copy of P input 1 will be created and another copy of P input 2 will be created. Similarly, another copy of P output 2 will be created and another copy of P output 1 will be created. In this case, what we are seeing here is that the partitions are being replicated by a factor of 2, but this gives birth to a new problem. So here we saw that replicated partition wise, topics are replicated partition wise, that means partitions are getting replicated across brokers. This is what we saw. To ensure that there is no data lost in case any broker or server goes down. This is the idea behind replication. But due to replication, one new problem occurred. The problem is that till now we were very sure that producer knows concretely to which entity it is required to produce data. Okay, let's iterate over this particular statement. Now, what is a producer? A producer is an entity or an application which writes data in a topic that is inside partitions of that topic. Okay, so nobody writes directly to a topic, they write to partition of the topic. Producer is the application which writes to the topic inside that partition. Now let's take one example, that we have this particular server, let's say server 1, and then there is an application app 1 which has a producer thread, and within this server we have certain number of partitions. Now let's say partition 1, and then there is partition 2. At this point of time we say partition factor is 1. That means there is only single partition per topic. Now this app, it knows to which partition. For example, it is required, when it is required to connect to partition 1, it will go to server 1. When it's required to partition 2, it will go to server 2. But let's say we say replicate by 2. Okay, so when we say replicate by 2, in this case assume there was another server which was like server 2 which was not having any partition, but when we replicate by 2, another copy of this, it will get replicated to the second self also. So it will go here. Now the issue is that this application will get confused to which save, it should write 2. It should write 2. Why it is getting confused? Because P1 is present here also and here also. P2 is present here also and here also. This is the case where something called zookeeper comes into picture to take care of the situation where we are dealing with number of replicas. We are dealing with number of multiple replicas. In that case, we require a partition leader. That means out of all the partitions, in this case, like there are 2 partitions, partition here and here, out of which to which app one will go, it will go to the leader partition. And who will elect this leader partition? Zookeeper will elect this leader partition. So whenever a situation arises which requires to have a leader partition or which requires to have a new leader partition, zookeeper steps in and then elect a new partition as leader partition. Here, leader of a partition in case of multiple replicas to which all read and writes will happen, and later the data will be synced across replicas, and this is decided by zookeeper. That means a partition leader will be the partition which will act as like prime partition. Every other partition will be there just for the sake of replica, being a replica. So this is another very important point. From Kafka cluster, we had single point of failure. To avoid single point of failure, we did replication. Replication gave birth to another problem which was having multiple partitions, so we were not able to decide. The application was not able to decide to which of the partition it should go. Hence, leader of the partition was done by zookeeper. It is very important. Just to reiterate, like what we have done, what we have learned so far is there is a producer. A producer is an application like a Spring Boot application which will connect with our this Kafka cluster. It will register itself as a producer and to which of the topic it wants to write to. So in this case, we see topic X is present in 3 different servers. So it is X is divided into 3 partitions, and then all these 3 partitions are spanned across 3 servers. They might be present over like number of servers is on us, how many servers do we want, like 3, 4, 2, and across all the servers the partitions will be distributed. There are 2 ways in which a producer can produce to a topic. One is round robin. Round robin means first producer will produce to a partition 0, then it will produce next message to partition 1, next message will go to partition 2, and again it will round robin 4, 5, 6, and this way it will go on. But sometimes we require that we can guess to which partition a message will go. Then we use hash based scheme. How would that happen? We will take mode of incoming ID of message with number of partitions spanned. So if number of partitions remain constant, then depending on this particular calculation we can always guess to which of the partition our message will go. This is another way of storing the data. So this was about Kafka producers. Now we talk about Kafka consumer. Kafka consumer is again an application which also takes Kafka topic in consideration. okay, and it reads from Kafka topic only, but it reads from partitions. Why? Because data is actually stored in partitions. This is one. Now in this case example, there is one application which is writing to topic, profile, log, and then there is another application which is reading out of profile log, which is basically having log of activity, like what the user is doing on their profile. Now there is an analytics system which is consumer of this, so basically they have subscribed to this kind of log. This is one application. Another application can be a data dump application, data B application, which does take the log activity and store it into a database. So in this case we have two producers, one producer which is this, and two consumers. One is analytics, another is database. So in this case we see that there can be multiple consumers for the same kind of data which is stored in this Kafka cluster. So just to reiterate, a Kafka reads from a topic, but if you remember we talked about parallelism. So we know that there are multiple partitions of same topic. So we can create multiple consumer threads. And then they can talk to multiple partitions in parallel. And this way we can increase reading speed of data. Okay, so this is the requirement of having parallelism. How parallelism is being done? By having multiple consumers, and we bundle all the consumers within an application, all the consumer threads within an application into a consumer group, and the consumer group will then takes data out of a topic. Automatically Kafka will assign one partition for a consumer, and that consumer will read data out of the partition. To avoid the duplicacy to be read while doing the reading, Kafka ensures that one partition is being read by only one consumer inside one consumer group. So in case you are seeing that partition 0 is going to consumer 1, so no other consumer apart from consumer 1 will be reading out of partition 0, because in case someone else is also reading, then it is a duplicacy. So this duplicacy can be avoided by assigning one partition to one consumer. This is what I have written here also, that a consumer reads from a topic. Data is always read in order within each partition. This is Kafka guarantee, because it was stored within order, so it will be read in order also. If there are multiple partitions for a topic, as we talked, we can do parallelism by creating consumer group. Within consumer group there will be multiple consumers. Kafka assigns one partition of a topic from one consumer in a consumer group. Only one consumer from a consumer group will be assigned to one partition. Else, like this is to avoid duplicacy. This is how reading is done out of Kafka topics. Okay. Again, if you have like three partitions, one partition, two partition, third partition, and within your consumer group, this is your partition. If your consumer group has 4 threads, thread 1, thread 2, thread 3, and then thread 4. Each of the partition will be assigned to one of the thread, but because this particular thread is within this consumer group and all the partitions are covered, this will remain inactive. So it does not do parallelism if you are creating more consumers than the number of partitions. So if consumers goes beyond partition count, then some consumers will remain inactive. Another question which can come to our mind is that, for example, if a consumer thread is reading data, if this is reading data and then it dies, how will that the new thread which will come up will get to know that till where data has been read out of partition? For that we are storing consumer offsets. Basically Kafka is storing by default. So Kafka by default is storing this consumer offset within the Kafka system, and whenever a consumer dies they can easily restart from where they left by consulting this consumer offset. Now there is another question which comes to our mind is that we talked about producer, we also talked about consumers, and we also talked about topic or partitions. But there is a cluster of servers. How would a producer or a consumer will get to know which partition is inside which server? To do that, we do Kafka broker discovery. In this case, a producer or a consumer, they seek a bootstrap server. A bootstrap server is somebody who is having meta info about complete architecture of Kafka, like inside architecture of Kafka. But in our case, in newer versions of Kafka, every broker is a bootstrap server. That means every broker will know about every other server and every other partition and every other structure inside the complete Kafka cluster. So our producer can connect to any of the server. It will be taken as bootstrap server. We are not required to define it by ourselves. Every server will act as a bootstrap server. Once a consumer or producer they makes a connection to that particular server within the cluster, a metadata request is sent to all other servers. Then a bootstrap server gathers that data and then give it back to the consumer or producer. This is how it happens. So in our case, in newer versions, we are just whenever in the configuration we are required to give this Kafka dot bootstrap server, we can just give IP of any of the server, any of the machine on which Kafka is installed. So this will do. In this case, the consumer and producer can talk to any of the server. They will act as bootstrap server. Another important topic is Zookeeper. If you remember when we talked about Zookeeper last, it was when we were talking about leader election of partitions. Leader electron partition, that means when there were multiple partitions, out of all the partitions we were required to find out or elect a leader to which every read and write will happen. So Zookeeper is an entity which manage brokers of Kafka. So basically Zookeeper is managing your Kafka, and then Kafka will be interacting with producers and also to consumers. This is how Kafka structure looks like. Now Zookeeper helps us in performing leader election for partitions. This we have seen. It also remains aware of any new topic or broker or topic deletion, anything else which goes on inside Kafka, and it sends notification to Kafka to make it aware, okay, the other parts of Kafka are being changed. One thing is ensured that Kafka cannot work without Zookeeper. So this has to be there. Zookeeper in itself is also a cluster of servers. So it will also have a leader and follower kind of pattern. So this is in short about Zookeeper. Zookeeper plays its role in managing Kafka. We are mostly interested in how Kafka works. So just to look at it visually, there is a Zookeeper cluster which is managing Kafka. Kafka is having multiple brokers. Those brokers in a collaboration talking to multiple producers, and then from the brokers, multiple consumers are reading data. This is how overall structure looks like. Apart from the producer API which we talked and the consumer API which we talked, there are three more APIs about which I would like to talk here. One is Kafka Stream, KSQL, and Kafka Connect. I will talk about these three APIs in very brief in this particular session. When we will have our next session, we will go deeper into some areas of Kafka. So first we talk about Kafka Connect APIs. Kafka Connect APIs are required when you are required to connect to data systems which are popular. That means, let's say you are connecting your Kafka this with JDBC kind of system. JDBC kind of driver is basically talking to a database and then reading the data out. For this, we can leverage Kafka Connect API. And from reading this is using Connect Source API and writing to Elasticsearch and Flat File system. Here could be more consumers. These two are, this is consumer 1, this is consumer 2, there could be third consumer also. Then to connect them also, we can use Kafka Connect Sync APIs. These are sync APIs. So if we are required to connect to data systems which are popular, and if we want to do that reliably and scalably, we can fall on Kafka Connect. Why? Because this is readily available. Else we will be required to create our own solution. So instead of writing our solution, we can use readily available solutions by Confluent. So this Kafka Connect a source API, Kafka Connect Sync API is used for this purpose. Second is KSQL and Kafka Streams API. Though both are same. So KSQL versus KStreams. These APIs are same in application. They can do same thing. They are required to do same thing. Like till now what we are doing is that this is Kafka. There is a producer which is producing to Kafka, and then there is a consumer which is reading out of Kafka. Then it is doing something. Then it is again giving back to Kafka, and Kafka from Kafka another application is reading. This is happening. But in case we are required to do something like this, there is Kafka, and then there is an application which is reading out of it and then writing back to it, just changing something. Example, you want to stream analysis or stream processing. For these purposes, when you're just reading out of Kafka and writing back to Kafka, you can use KSQL or you can use Kafka Streams. This is how Kafka KSQL and KStreams API are being used. So you are producing to Kafka, but from one topic it is reading, KStream is reading, and then writing back to another topic. inside Kafka again. So this is how KSQL and Kafka Streams API are being used. If your solution can be created with the help of a SQL-like structure, then we can use KSQL. If it is a little complex to do, then we can fall back to Kafka Stream APIs. If it is complex to do, one question can arise: why can't we just use like producer and consumer here? Producer and consumer API here. Well, we can do the same application. The same application can be a producer also and can be a consumer also. That is one way. But if you combine one application as both producer and consumer, then it acts as Kafka Streams. Then it can simply act as Kafka Streams. So Kafka Streams API is basically API which is combining the functionality of being a producer and consumer of one single application. Now we look at some of the famous use cases. Activision is using Kafka for over 1000 topics. They are handling data 10,000 to 100,000 per second. This is insanely high number. Another application, Tinder, they are using Kafka to leverage multiple business purposes. They are using 86 billion events per day. It's insanely high number. Uber is also storing data for real-time processing, data about how ETAs are getting calculated, how customer and driver are getting matched. Uber is using Kafka for this purpose. Apache Kafka is also being used by LinkedIn, who originally created. They are using it for user activity tracking. They are using it for handling 7 trillion messages per day. Very high number. Also within my own organization, Netomi, we are using Kafka for handling high income of data traffic. Yeah. So there are like multiple organizations which are using Kafka for multiple purposes. Some of them I have shown here, but there are others also. Thank you. This was about Kafka. This was mostly about why and what. We have not talked about how. This is a big topic, hence I have left it for another session. Intentionally. So we will discuss how part where we will see some practical examples. In that session. For now, it was our agenda to cover why Kafka-like system is required and what is Kafka. So I hope this was helpful to you guys, and this will help you in learning how of Kafka in next coming sessions.